recorded, and we will put this on our YouTube page, but it'll also reside on Warwick's Facebook page that you can come back to later if you miss anything, or if you join us now and you have to pop out, you can always come back and look at it later. So I'm going to fill a little bit of airtime so that we don't miss any of this conversation, because I'm so excited about this one, because it's just got everything that I just, we were talking in the green room a little bit. Got a little PTSD for my own kids' stuff going on. It's just, so can't wait to hear this conversation. But anyways, just real quick, a little bit about Warwick's for those of you that maybe don't live in the San Diego, La Jolla area where Warwick's is located. That's where we're at. We are, well, we're not the oldest bookstore in the country. We're the oldest continuously family-owned bookstore in the country, woman-owned. Nancy Warwick is the 4th generation owner. So very proud of that. And while we are a legacy in San Diego for being a bookstore and a wonderful gift and jewelry and all kinds of fine pens and wonderful things, one of the things we are known for is bringing wonderful authors to you. And so Nicole and Lacy, we are so thrilled to be bringing you in this weird virtual world, bringing you to our customers. So we appreciate you coming and being with us today. Couple things and I want to thank your publisher too, Nicole, for setting this up, because this is a lot of back end work that we do in doing this. And so we love supporting the publishers by supporting you and your books. So couple ways for you to participate tonight. In the Facebook chat, I'm going to be putting in Nicole and Lacy's latest book in there. You can click on that and easily we will ship it to you. But if you are in the area and you want to come by, we would love to see you. Nothing better, Lacy, right, than going into Warwick's and browsing that book section. There's lots of good books there to discover besides these two wonderful ladies. So I'll put those books in there for you to click on very easily. And then Lacy and Nicole are going to chat for about 30-ish minutes. But if you have questions, go ahead and put those into the chat. I'll bring those back. We're not going to bring them in live because there's this weird Facebook delay. So, but I'll bring those into them after they're done chatting for about a half hour. So I think Facebook's let people know that we're here. We'll probably still get people popping in and out, but it's all good. So let's get the show going. So Nicole LaPorte is an LA-based senior writer for Fast Company. She previously was a columnist for the New York Times and a staff writer for Newsweek, The Daily Beast, and Variety. She is the author of The Men Who Would Be King, Movies, Moguls, and a company called DreamWorks. And she's here tonight to talk to us about Guilty Admissions. And with her tonight is Lacy Crawford. There it is. There's the book. Lacy is the author of fiction and nonfiction, including the satire Early Decisions and the memoir Notes on a Silencing, a New York Times editor's choice that was named Best of Summer by Time, People, and Real Simple. Nice job, Lacy. Love that. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Narrative, Lit Hub, Vanity Fair, and elsewhere. She lives here in California. Can I say just right down the street, I think, with her husband and 3 children. So with that, ladies, have a great conversation. I will see you in about a half hour.
Thank you so much.
All right. So yes, this book is a dish. I want to hold it up again because because I binge read this. I binge read this the way I binge watch certain shows on Netflix and other channels. And I was surprised to do that because, as Julie mentioned, I did write a satire called Early Decision, which was based on the 15 years that I had spent working as an independent college counselor, though it never occurred to me to pay coaches bribes to get students in. I just worked with them on their essays. I was very slow to figure out the real game there, but I was working at about the same time Rick Singer was. And so when this story broke, I thought I knew the story. And I read your book and I realized that I truly had no idea. So I wonder if you can just describe, for those of us who think we know, but don't really know, exactly who Rick Singer was and what it is has he been convicted yet? No, we're still going to trial.
Yeah, he has not been sentenced yet. So there are 40 parents involved in this and numerous colleges
Right.
and numerous coaches, and they're sort of going through them and sentencing those who, sentencing them. And once they've wrapped up that, he's sort of at the very end of the line, and everything's been slowed down because of COVID. So no, he's actually still out and about. I mean, TMZ has caught him paddleboarding in Newport Beach,
In a Speedo.
Florida, in the Speedo. Yeah. So yeah, it's sort of amazing. And for my reporting, I went up to Sacramento and I actually saw him at a gym. He's this kind of gym rat who, shows up at 4 a.m. and spends, he's very maniacal, very disciplined. So I actually saw him there, tried to talk to him, and he completely flipped out. But anyway,
Did you identify yourself as who you
I
were?
told him I was writing a book, and at that point, and it was sort of strange. I had been advised, or someone, when I found out where he worked out, and I was able to, I sort of planned showing up there and casually bumping into him, by the elliptical trainer. I was talking to someone, I don't know if it was my agent or my editor or someone, they're like, well, why don't you write him a letter and just give him the letter? So if he freaks out, you can hand it to him. But what I didn't realize was that this guy has been subpoenaed and approached by law enforcement so many times that if you hand him a letter, he will flip, so he literally put his hands up and was like, I can't. So it was all very awkward, and I had to kind of quickly leave. And anyway,
this is all about college admissions. So what?
Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Yes. So Rick Singer, was, in the early days, back in the early 90s, started as an independent college counselor, which at the time was a very new field, tutoring kids to help them get into college, helping on their essays and test prep and that kind of thing.
But what did he know about any of those things? I mean, had he gone to a good college? Was he an ace at standardized testing? Did he have any insight that he could bring to the table?
No to ACE at standardized testing. He did go to college, but was not a standout student, kind of kicked around these smaller schools in Texas. But what he did know, and sort of the secret sauce, was he'd started out as a high school basketball coach and briefly a college basketball coach. And he started to learn through athletic admissions, sort of the athletic departments at colleges, and then the greater sort of landscape of colleges. And he, like I said before, he's very maniacal, he's very disciplined. So he would fly all over the country while he was running this tutoring business and really get to know the coaches, get to, talk to, I don't know if he spoke with people in admissions, but he got to know all the granular details of these colleges. And so he would come back and kind of wow these parents and these kids, because he could tell you exactly what Duke was looking for that year. Or, if you're an English major, Johns Hopkins would be great for you. Or, things that I'm sure you knew too when you were doing it, but he was kind of an encyclopedia of knowledge about these schools. So anyway, his sort of mom and pop business that was mostly legitimate, or it was very legitimate in the beginning, and then it kind of went down a slippery slope. It amped up around 2009, where he started to come into contact with much more wealthy clients and realized just how badly they wanted to get their kids into college. And at this point, also, college admissions was becoming a lot more difficult. Acceptance rates were going way down. And a lot of these parents, were incredibly frustrated. I sent my kid to this great high school and paid for all this stuff, and the kid has a 4.0. Why can't my child get into Stanford? So it was sort of a confluence of influences, and he started accepting bribes to get kids into college. And he operated what he called a side door scheme. And there were sort of two parts of it. One was to pass the student off as a fake athlete and basically bribe the coach. And he would literally make up these very fake, in some cases, photoshopping a head onto someone else's body, but pass a kid off as an athlete and get them in through, as a walk-on to a team. And the other aspect of the side door was he had someone working for him who would cheat on the ACT or the SAT and have the answers corrected, or in some case, his guy, Mark Riddell, would take the test for them and send it off to the College Board or the ACT. So those were the two side doors.
What's amazing to me is that you describe in the book the shift in admissions from, it used to be that a student who was spectacularly well-rounded, who was a tri-varsity athlete and had terrific grades and was student body president and in 3 choirs, would be admitted to college in the 90s, even the early 2000s. But over time, as those application rates were soaring, and you mentioned this, and you give in the opening chapter what I think is an excellent overview of how this has happened, right? That so many people are using the Common Application now. It's so much easier to submit a greater number of applications. We heard last week that schools that used to pull regionally are now pulling nationally. You know, kids are applying from all over the place. So these admissions rates are going way, way down because application rates are going way, way up. And in the course of this, it's no longer good enough to be well-rounded, because what the school wants is a well-rounded class and not a well-rounded individual. So what's the phrase that you use for what each student must now be?
Oh, pointy.
Pointy.
So not well-rounded, you have to be pointy. So you have to be the star cellist or.
Exactly. No, beyond the star cellist. I mean, I had a student years ago who joked that if you want to get into Wellesley, you start a nonprofit. If you want to get into Yale, you get it funded.
Yes.
So right. So you have, you have to go all the way. Exactly. And that is not far off of singer speak for branding a kid. Right. I mean, this was effectively what he was doing, but still the hook of athletics stands out even above what we call legacy admissions, right? People whose parents or grandparents have gone to the same school. Some schools care, some schools don't. Even above development admissions, if you've got $50 million, to offer on behalf of your kid, the athletic hook, you had one person who told you it was close to 100%.
Yeah. And I actually went back and looked at that because I knew we'd be talking about this. And so the way, I mean, yeah, but essentially, and as I was reporting this and talking to people in admissions and college counselors and families and students, I mean, athletics is the hook of all hooks. And there was a lawsuit against Harvard in 2018 related to this. And in all the documents that came out from it, they said that the data was that over a period of 6 years, recruited athletes had an 86% acceptance rate, and that's at Harvard. So you can imagine what it's like at a sort of much less competitive school. And then the 100% came, I did speak to someone who had been an admissions officer at an Ivy League school. And what she talked to me about, and I'd been kind of aware of this, but she really elucidated it for me. And it again speaks to why athletics is such a hook, is that they start pre-screening these kids very early. I mean, as early as sophomore year, a student can be talking to a coach, and it's all casual and informal, but the coach is already giving that student feedback and looking at their transcripts and saying, you might want to load up on AP calculus, you better take the SAT again. You're a couple 100 points, or I don't know, 100 points too low. And the coach is then liaising with the liaison in admissions, like the athletic admissions person, and getting feedback from them who's saying, maybe they're the ones actually saying they need pre-calc or whatever. But the point is, for over a year and a half, a student is being prepped before they've even applied to the school. So by the time that student sends the application and they've gotten all this feedback, on top of which the coach wants them for their athletic ability. So that's part of it. And then, but anyway, but what this person had said was that if a student goes through that process and the coach is talking to admissions and giving them feedback, and the kid is academically hitting the marks, which are much lower for
much lower than
but
where they
much lower. Another coach said it would be shocking if anyone knew sort of how low.
Right.
But if they are, then it's 100%. That kid's getting in. So but still, I mean, 86% at Harvard, that's insane.
And so how this actually works, as I understand it, is that each coach has a certain number of slots each year, right? That the admissions office grants them. So the football team might get 26 and the crew team might get 12 and the squash team might get 4. I don't know. And if your name goes in one of those slots, you'd have to really drop the ball to not convert that into an admit. Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, so scholarships are one thing, none of the kids that Singer got in were scholarship. No coaches were giving up scholarship slots, right, because they need an actual athlete for that. Yeah. For that case. They weren't giving up those, but the trick was that all these coaches have walk-ons, and a walk-on doesn't necessarily have to be that great. A walk-on can be, and when you have like a water polo team with 50 kids on it, probably 10 to 15 are just getting the water or, sitting on the bench. And those were the slots that he exploited, and the coaches were were willing to give up in exchange for money.
And what sorts of parents fell for this? And why?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I wrote a story, I read an essay that Time magazine put up this afternoon, and it talks about the white fear the fear amongst white privileged parents that Singer really tapped into. And I think And it really has actually come to a head more so even in the last year because of BLM and COVID and all these different things. But they were parents that grew up and maybe through their own experience, in some cases, I mean, some didn't go to college, but the ones that did, I think, had their own experience had been fairly easy. And they were used to a system where if you did send your kid to the right school and you did pay for test prep and the kid did well enough, or even if they didn't do well enough, if you ticked off all the boxes, the kid was going to go to a pretty good school. And because of all the reasons we just discussed, these were parents that were sending the kids to these elite schools in Los Angeles and many other places. And, you know, the student might come home one day from a meeting with their college counselor and say, oh no, you know, it looks like University of Michigan or whatever it was that wasn't acceptable to the parent. So it was parents that were frustrated by that. You know, they were very, you know, of course, they were status obsessed. Look, all the schools in this are name brand schools. And they were deeply insecure. And I think they also were parents who were used to outsourcing things, and they were used to just other people taking care of business and getting things done, you know. And it starts to have a chapter on preschool where, you know, that this whole system actually starts, at least in some neighborhoods and in some parts of LA, as early as preschool. So it was a lot of different things. And then the other brand of parents were ones who hadn't gone to college. And I think there was some naivete, they didn't understand, but they wanted it badly because they really saw, probably even more so, they saw college as a status symbol. And especially here in LA, it's something that stood for something. So people like Massimo and Lori Laughlin, they'd never gone to college. And there were a couple others that they weren't from that world.
One of the things that I found most heartbreaking, but also most delicious, was the chapter on preschools. And I mean, I don't know, has this been optioned? Because this is a mini series. It just is. This is a scripted series. But I forget how many preschools you identify, these private schools in LA that are impossible to get into with your 18-month-old or whatever it is. And the parents do this. And it's easy to say from the outside, they're doing this because they think it will get them into whatever the right elementary school is, which will get them into Harvard Westlake, which will get them into the Ivy League. And yes, of course, yes, they're imagining a certain trajectory, but there's something else going on that you wrote about that I think is really more important. And that is parents who don't trust themselves to make any decisions at all on behalf of their kids. And so they outsource everything, as you say, and they look to other professionals, and especially high status professionals, to tell them how it's done. Right. So parents are sort of de-skilled almost, you know, starting at the level of preschool. And I would love it if you would talk a little bit about your experience talking to these preschool directors and their take on all of this.
Yeah, well, the funny thing is, I have to say, in the past week, so the book came out like 2 weeks ago, the biggest response has been about the preschool chapter. And it's
amazing.
And, well, some people are like you, but I actually and I've been very nervous about it because, you know, some of the directors, they're not used to publicity. And I mean, I was very clear, like, I'm writing a book, you're going to be in the chapter, but I still, you know, these are not, it's, you know, I'm not looking to shame anyone or whatever. But I've also gotten a response from people I interviewed and they love it. Like the woman I interviewed about the tutoring, there's this tutoring company, Kinder Prep, where you, for $350 an hour.
Get handwriting, right?
Yes, to help the kid get into the right elementary school, and maybe they don't know how to spell their name. And she sent me an email. I was like, thank you so much.
I've got a bunch of clients now.
I was like, oh my God. Yeah, I love it. So yeah, the preschool chapter, I didn't intend to write. But it was sort of the more parents I talked to of high school aged kids here and sort of talking to them about their experience, it just kept coming up. Like, well, you know, this starts in preschool. And I sort of would listen. I was like, I don't have the time to deal with preschool. Like, I got to keep my focus here. But eventually it just sort of reached a point where I was like, well, I at least need to look into this. And then when I started hearing words like tier 1 preschool, you know, and yeah, like tutors for 4-year-olds, I was like, okay, well, this actually lends a lot of context. But yeah, the preschool directors, I mean, it's just, there's a lot of lack of awareness, I think. I think, you know, the couple that I really talked the most to are very well-intentioned, and they, you know, they're child educators. They have a lot of experience. I think they run a good program, but they don't well, one in particular, like, didn't bat an eye at just the fundraising culture that was going on, and the fact that the night before I talked to her, there'd been this crazy, not well, just this very extravagant gala that was like straight out of Big Little Lies. Um, or that they, I don't know, it just felt like there was a lack of awareness that they were kind of enabling this culture. And the other thing is the position they hold. A lot of people, one of the reasons people choose to send their child to these preschools is because they want the director to vouch for them when they apply to elementary school. So it's like the head of the school at Harvard Westlake is the equivalent of the person running this preschool, because the thought is that, when they send in their application, this director will say, oh, great family, really supported the preschool. In other words, gave money, and, very involved parents, good kid, they want that extra word of mouth or support, because frankly, getting into a lot of these private elementary schools is as competitive as getting into the competitive high school and then college. So it just starts so young, and it all comes down to scarcity. These preschools actually are hard to get into because so many people are applying, and they literally have, 20 spots. So anyway, yeah, that was an interesting
I put a
reporting.
box around what you wrote in the very beginning. I'm just going to read a couple sentences because this struck me. In top LA private high schools, the game for parents is getting their kids into a top college. Okay, I'm sure. Parents tackle it the way they do everything else in their lives, by winning favor with important people. So I starred that because I thought, my gosh, I've never seen it put quite that way, but that's exactly right. They don't tackle it by coaching their kids, or by riding their kids, or by creating a culture of obsessive performance and achievement, although they might also be doing that, or by, I don't know, any of the enrichment, any of the kind of inside out, parenting that they might do. It is about knowing people. It is about networking. It is about access. Even before money, it is about access, right? And that, I think, is what Rick Singer sold. He went in, what ballroom was it that he pitched them from? The Beverly Hills?
Oh yeah, the Hotel Bel Air. Yeah.
And he said, I am the guy who can open these doors. And from the very beginning, these parents have thought that the secret to parenting is to meet the right person to do it for you. Right?
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. And I mean, he was very smart in that, because, I was talking to an independent college counselor recently about the book, I guess. And he said, yeah, I had no idea who Rick Singer was. He was known at these schools, but it wasn't, there was no advertising. He was very selective about who he worked with in order to keep that sense of exclusivity.
Yes.
And he would groom parents. And there's this one mother I talked to who, had kind of called him up, and someone had given her his name. And she had one kid at a public high school, a very good public high school, was public, and one kid at a private school. And she said the whole phone call was him just sussing her out. And he didn't like that the kid, in the end, I think she just decided, she didn't like him, but he wasn't that interested, because the kid went to Pali High. And, so he wanted to keep it in, like, basically the billion dollar club, or whatever it was. Because exactly, he did recognize the currency, literally, of just
right. Not only could they afford it, but these are parents who, and you do also write about this, a very LA centric book, which was interesting to me, because I live in Southern California now, but I was raised in the Midwest and went to school on the East Coast, and it is different. Of course it is, regionally different. The sense that there is not a long tradition of familiarity, particularly with East Coast schools. That's both good and bad. It means your grandpa didn't go there. How nice, how refreshing, right? But it also means that a lot of this is new. And so it is perhaps grounded in status in a slightly different way. And these parents are hit up for donations to preschools. I mean, even before they are admitted, is this true? I mean, or do they cut their first checks as soon as they get the letter of admission? Right. I mean, it is.
At which level, the preschool or the high school?
The preschool level. I mean, it starts with these preschool bashes and then goes all the way up. So they have been trained that if you are a part of these educational communities, which of course you want to be, because who wouldn't want to be? Have you seen Harvard Westlake? It's fantastic. You know, why wouldn't you want your kid to have those opportunities? You will be cutting checks, and that is above and beyond your huge tuition. And that is how this works. So I think another line you had that I really liked is, no one ever believed that college admissions was the meritocracy it's proclaimed itself to be. I don't think, I agree completely. I think parents all know that it's a ruse. The trick to it, though, is they do believe it's meritocratic in that they belong there, right? And their kids belong there. So it's not actually about performing as a young person, so much as it is about what we feel, where we feel we belong, which is both entitlement but also ambition, you know, and fantasy. So what Singer did, and this is a fascinating thing at the end of your book, he never used the word bribe, right? He used the word donation, and the donations went to athletic funds and some fake charity that he made up, right? And what was that horrible phrase he used that it helped needy Cambodians?
Oh yeah, needy Cambodians.
I mean, just that, like, anyone with a nonprofit brain reads this and is like, call the IRS, you know, shut this down. Like, this is, you know, but he, you know, after he got caught and he was exposed by someone who was trying to wriggle out of SEC, out of trading charges, right? Like insider trading.
This got better. Yeah.
Yeah. Who tips him off, who tips off the feds that this guy's running this to basically try to lighten his own sentence. Isn't that right?
Right.
So they get Singer, they wire him up and they get him to try to call the parents to get them to admit to what they've done. And they, being sweet feds, I was like, oh, that's so sweet. They're trying to get him to say bribe, right? And he's like, well, I'm not going to tell them that. Like that would be lying to them, right? So he can't, the language of what he was actually doing would not resonate with these parents. They literally wouldn't understand what that meant.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's so fascinating that he learned their language and spoke it, and that this whole, the entire crime was veiled in this, the language of donations and of giving, you know, and he knew, and he never, when he's forced, you're right, when he's forced to say the word bribe, he doesn't want to. And so it's this whole kind of, just this language that these parents learn and are trained by the schools, frankly. You know, in many ways, parents are just reacting to it, you know, early on. And just to go back to your earlier question about the preschools, just because it's kind of also fascinating. I mean, there are parents I talked to who their child was like in the mommy and me group. So they weren't even and they were doing the mommy and the me group to get into the preschool.
Get into preschool, right.
But while they were still in that, so they're not yet enrolled in this preschool, they would go to the fundraiser and be asked straight out to make donations or you know, again, donations or contribute, and then attend the gala and to buy things for, you know, $10,000 in some case, or many, you know, so, and they would literally go to the gala and be invited, like they shouldn't even be invited to this thing. Right. So yes, it starts really early, and he was, Singer understood it perfectly. And then the other thing that was kind of interesting is I spoke to this person after I already turned the book in, but this guy had known Rick, and he said, you know, Rick, and this kind of would speak about all this, and this guy had some idea that something illegal was going on, but Rick was so really believed, again, that this was not a meritocracy, that the whole system was so broken that what he was doing, I honestly don't think he thought it was all that wrong. You know what I mean? Like on some level, he knew it was a crime, but there was a way he justified it to himself and to these parents that does go back to this idea that it's not a meritocracy. So it's just, there's so many blurry lines, despite the fact that it's absolutely a black and white crime. But, you know, just in the language we use, in the actual back door and side door that does exist, whether it's for, you know, athletes or VIP students. I mean, when through this scandal, through a parent who was fighting the charges, USC sort of did this big document dump. They were forced to by their lawyers, that had like literally color-coded spreadsheets, you know, with the list of VIP admits that would just say things literally like son of surgeon,
Yes.
Dad is realtor in Aspen.
Yes.
You know, no one's faking it. No one's, it's all, so I don't know if I answered your question, but.
No, you did. And I mean, I think the parents got very, very close to not thinking they were doing anything wrong. I think they thought there was something that was a little bit uncouth, maybe at the end there. You know, very few of them were overtly, you know, I will cut a check, make it happen. I don't care what you have to do. You know, a few of them were that way, mostly the dads, frankly.
Right.
But the moms, you know, there's this heartbreaking bit about Felicity Huffman, whose daughter is a wildly gifted actress, right? She's got a ton of talent. Everyone you talk to says, no, she's really extraordinary. She wants to study at Juilliard or a couple other places, and she has to get her scores up to get in, right? So she's almost an athlete, except that she's an actor.
She actually didn't need scores for Julia. That was the whole irony of the Felicity Huffman thing. So the girl, you're right, is talented. She wants to go to Juilliard. Juilliard doesn't, you don't need SATs to get in. But what Singer said to Felicity Huffman was, well, that's fine, but you know, you need backups. And for all of these other schools, like if she wants to go to Carnegie Mellon or whatever, even though this, you know, given her talent, given her parents, I mean, I don't know. I mean,
Juilliard, it might have worked out otherwise.
But she at least had a shot.
So Felicity Huffman, God, it's so heartbreaking. So Felicity Huffman, who seems to me to be the one who was in possession of some humility and was able to speak thoughtfully about what the choices that she had made, and sort of driving down the canyon and saying to herself, turn around, turn around, turn around, don't do this. But she sees a daughter who has a dream, who is very, very good at what she does. And the man who knows everything about college is saying, just have her get extra time. Let me take care of this, and it will sort itself out. You can convince yourself it's not a zero-sum game. You can convince yourself that she's not taking anyone else's spot, right? I mean, I hope I wouldn't come to that conclusion, and that's not how we parent around here. But you can kind of understand that slippery slope, you know, as you describe it. But what was so amazing to me is that Singer, he lies all the time. He has a pathological liar. And you sort of track the beginning when he's in Sacramento, and he's a big man in Sacramento who's making stuff up. And there's an early college counselor who's onto him and starts compiling this binder. I love this woman. She's amazing. She's been doing it for like 30 years, right? Yeah. And then and she's like, I was right.
Very excited for all these books coming out.
She must be. She must be. But then his grandiosity kicks in, and he starts saying more and more things about himself. And so by the end, he's telling people, was he telling them that he like co-founded Apple? What was the thing about like Steve? He was like on the board with Steve Jobs, and he'd been an astronaut. Like what? I mean, didn't he walked in and said all of these bizarre things, and nobody, these powerful people who know people who do these things, right? Yeah. Nobody called him on it. And what I thought as I was reading this is, oh my God, he is the logical extension of the college admissions race. So for every kid who is an excellent kid, who is, like most kids, coming from a position of some privilege, whatever that looks like. And when I say like most kids, I mean applying to these colleges. We know that they are wildly disproportionately drawn from the top 10% of income brackets in the United States, as opposed to the bottom 90%. And being a 4.0 straight A student who does a lot of good things is not really going to get you very far. You know, you have this great line that good old fashioned hard work now gets you nowhere. You know, these kids are working their butts off, and it's not good enough. And that's true for these top schools. It's just not. So in the effort to brand themselves, to create a hook, to become pointy, they have to create a brand. You know, by the time they're 15 or 16, they have to become little salespeople. And the logical extension of that madness is you turn into someone like Rick Singer. And some of these kids, I don't know if you've hung out with kids who are applying to college lately, but some of them, you know, honestly, they're like, well, I was going to sort out the problem of deafness in my lab at UCSD, but then COVID shut us down. I mean, like, it is really, they have risen to meet that challenge in a way that leaves aside a lifetime of work and growth and experience, right? Yeah. Because they're projecting some fantasy of themselves. And I thought, God, what about these kids? Do we know about the kids? What happened when this was discovered? Did they get to finish school?
Yeah, it was mixed. And I kind of stayed away from the kids in this just because out of private, you know,
is that why?
Most kids, I mean, a vast majority had no idea. There were a few that did. But most of them were really pawns in this. And I thought, you know, through all the legal cases and discussions, there's always who's the victim, is the victim the school? There's a whole legal debate about this in terms of how people are getting sentenced and things like that. And I just thought, the victims are the kids, really. They're the ones whose, their reputation's been severely tainted, if not ruined. Some of them were, their admission was rescinded, or they actually had to leave the school. One of the Yale students had to leave. Some students, all the schools handled it differently. So, but I remember, I did talk to one dad who said that his, it was heartbreaking, obviously for him to watch it, but his kid was at one of these schools and was watching the news break on March of 2019 and seeing it all over the news, and there's his name, and that's how he's learning about it. And he's surrounded by, actually before his name was out there, sorry, his friends are all making jokes about it. So he's in this college environment where it's just a big joke because it was one of the schools that was involved. And at that point, his name actually wasn't out there. So he's, it's all over social media and whatnot. So I think, for the kids, it was pretty heartbreaking. But
I wish for them, the ones who had no idea what was done to them is unforgivable. I don't know how you repair that relationship with a parent. And there's a line in the beginning of the book where you say, students said, "Why didn't you believe in me? Why didn't you believe?" And we understand why, because the parents know how competitive it is out there and they lost their minds, right? But I did sort of wish that a lot of kids could have that moment, maybe kids I went to school with, maybe me, but could have that moment when the carriage turns back into a pumpkin, when you actually realize that maybe your parents didn't bribe anyone, but my dad went to the college I went to, and so did his dad. And what would it have looked like if all of that had somehow, if those chickens had somehow come home to roost, right? Or for the athletes, or for anybody. I think it's a fantasy to imagine that there's something like a pure meritocracy, but maybe Singer did us all a favor by showing us that it is so far from a meritocracy. I'm not even sure we should say congratulations to a child who gets in.
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry if you don't. I see Julie chiming back.
I know, I see Julie.
I'm back in. Oh my God, can we just keep talking all night? This is like so fascinating. It's easy for you because you're through this and your children are grown, but Nicole and I are still uphill.
I've now been banned from every private school in LA, so.
How that was going to work out. And Harvard Wesley missed a beat too. They gave no comment to your book, and I don't know why they wouldn't take the opportunity to reiterate, their mission and transparency. Oh, come on, really, what are our assets? 200 million? But still, enough is never enough. Enough is never enough. Amen. All right. That's honestly. Okay, and I know you guys started off the conversation talking about you jumped in on who Rick was. The whole time I was wondering, Nicole, what compelled you to take this story on? What was that thing that said, I've got to do this?
It was sort of a few things. I remember when the story broke, and like everyone else, I was kind of seeing it on Facebook and seeing it all over. And there were just different elements of it that resonated kind of on a personal level. And my backstory is I've been reporting on, I live in LA and I report mainly on entertainment, and now it's kind of tech and entertainment, but very businessy. And so I think it was also just a moment of I've been kind of toying with other ideas for a book where I wanted to get out of entertainment just briefly for a project, not to change my career, change my reporting job, but to at least have, I don't know, to go into something also where I had no sources and I was just kind of jumping in feet first. It just sounded really fun. And I don't know, in the end, I don't know how fun it is, but, and then the story, so much of it resonated on so many different levels. I went to Georgetown, which is one of the schools in the scandal. I actually didn't get in out of high school, even though my mother went there. And I remember I was really heartbroken. This was the early 90s. And, I'd had a very mixed high school record. I sort of became a student later, like around sophomore year. So I had this kind of questionable freshman. So all these reasons. And now looking back, I could have totally branded myself, but I didn't get in. And I just do remember the heartbreak. And even back then in the early 90s, there was this there were certain schools you wanted to go to, and there was no great reason for it. I think, so that was one thing. I also rode when I was at Georgetown. So I was on the crew team, and, obviously that was something that Singer exploited. And I think it's just, at the moment, there was just such a simple question to me, like, how did we get here? Because I've been so out of it and I don't have kids in high school. So the idea that everyone now has these tutors and that, it's impossible to get into Stanford. There was just this kind of, I felt like there were 20 years of questions I had that I was really curious about just learning and
Yeah.
sort of better understanding how did we get here? So.
And it's kind of been going on, not to the extent that but for a long time. I mean, getting into these top schools,
Yeah.
Lacy,
Well,
it's
it kind
like,
of dates back. I mean, the thing everyone always mentions is the U.S. News and World Report list. That really, so that was first published, I think, in '86. So it was kind of the late '80s. And I remember getting that, and oh my God, yeah, you opened it and you looked at the rankings, and I mean, that really like kind of codified everything and quite frankly, ranked things. So it was suddenly there was a score. Now there was a number, and so when you're dealing with a 16-year-old who's searching for their identity or looking for validation, there it is.
right. And it's so much to put on these kids. I mean, it is, and the kids get kind of wrapped up in it a little bit too. I mean, they see these, dream schools, and it's not going to, like, they're going to be shattered if they don't get into this dream school. Their life's over. And so we're all parents. It's like, we all want that to give our kids what they dream of.
I've seen the pendulum swing now, which is parents who are saying to their kids over and over, I don't care where you go. We don't care where you go. We want you to be healthy. We want you to be safe. But I don't know that those words, fall on solid ground if you've raised your child in a hyper-competitive environment,
right,
with tutors and, private schooling and all of these other opportunities. It's very clear where
or even if you're not paying the tutoring, if you hold the bar up where it's like, okay, as a parent, C's aren't good enough.
That's
B's
right.
aren't good enough. Why aren't you getting A's? I mean, just even without the tutoring, just the bars that we put on our kids,
Yes. Yes. And I see also students who are extraordinary and who would have been admitted easily to the schools they're applying to even 15 years ago, who are not admitted simply because numerically it's impossible. There are just too many kids applying, but the athletes are still getting in, right? And the legacies in some cases are still getting in. And that starts to feel, and I'm mindful always that if that feels unfair to the privileged, hardworking kid, we aren't even beginning to talk about the lack of access to higher education and anything like legitimate equity, with regard to students all across the country. So what I was so excited, Nicole, when I found out that your book was coming out, because I think it is so easy to dish the varsity blues scandal. I mean, it's like, like the prosecutors at dawn, like, breaking down doors and dragging out these LA mommies and like the Botox is still cooling, right? But what's really going on is we're exposing a culture of access and network that is bullshit. Can I say that, Julie? I mean,
yes, you can.
It's bullshit. And there are students who are phenomenal and who do end up getting into these places, and they go on and they do wonderful things and they're developing vaccines for us and saving our lives. But there are a bunch of kids who aren't, and they're either they deserve to be there and they're not, or they don't deserve to be there and they are. And I'm not sure how we can adjust our fantasy of what the meritocracy is in a way that supports kids to be a little bit more realistic about what's possible for them.
Yeah. And I think it also, it just changes the idea of what the college experience is, because if you're expected to be fully branded by the time you're 16, what's the point? You're entering college.
But, yeah.
The college is suddenly, you're seeing being admitted to college as the end of the journey. It doesn't even matter really what you do, if that's what you're saying, as opposed to college is where you find yourself. College is where you find that passion. And what about those kids who flourish later and who don't have the perfect transcript, by junior year, whatever? It's just a shame for the culture. It's a shame for the kids. And I don't think it necessarily, the logic doesn't, as you say, add up to the fact that because you're fully branded, you get accepted, that you will therefore go on to lead this incredibly
usually they don't. Usually they don't. They because there's been so much pressure to that point. That it kind of explodes. And it's the ones that don't know at 17 what they want to do, that end up being the, Steve Jobs of the world.
Yeah.
I mean, this has been my experience, certainly in life, is friends of mine who dropped out for 3 years and like moved to Santa Cruz and nobody heard from them for a while. And then like they reemerged, at UCLA
Right.
with some community college credits. And now they're running an academic medical department.
Right.
And they just
but you can't tell, and it kind of does go back to the kids. I mean, I know we're talking about parents in this, but it kind of does go back to the kids and the culture. If they're in these kind of high schools that are uber competitive and that are uber, they get wrapped up in it. They get wrapped up in that. They want to go to that prime school, and so it's hard to dissuade them from, the perfect example of this is, I'll take a couple seconds here real quick. My husband and I are San Diego State graduates. All right. So my kids went to La Costa Canyon High School. And so they applied to all over the place. And so we made them apply to San Diego State because it's right down the street the whole bit. And so they got accepted right away. They had good grades the whole bit. But my one daughter, she got accepted to another school. And she goes, "Oh, thank God, I worked too damn hard to go to San Diego State." And my husband and I were like, "Excuse me?" We did pretty good with that education. But there was such this like competitiveness in the schools there. It's so, and then, it's it's a really weird, dynamic. It's a very strange dynamic. Nicole, so quick question for you. So again, you said a little bit. So with the response of the book, it's only been a couple of weeks, and you said but have you gotten some good response that you've appreciated about the book coming out?
Yeah, I have. I mean, it's funny. The people I was most nervous about, a lot of the private school parents who, spoke very candidly to me, and I a lot of them, I like them. I do empathize with them, and I feel like. But I was afraid that perhaps the books, I don't want to paint everyone with the same brush. I don't want to just, I don't want to describe these parents as, first class villains across the board. There is nuance to it. And so I did, I was a little worried that some parents I had talked to, but I haven't heard from all of them, but some were just like, "Thank you. Like, you did a great job of capturing the neuroses and this culture we're all kind of buying into." So I did appreciate that. And yeah, no, I have gotten, I mean, I've it seems like people read the book pretty quickly.
I told you, it's a
It's
binge.
obsessive.
Oh my God, it's a binge. It's great. It's like a pedicure book. Not that it gets pedicures anymore, but if we did,
Yeah, but if we did, if we were allowed to do that.
You'd sit in the bin with the thing the whole time because it's great.
It was written that quickly too. So, and that was always the point, when I was writing it, obviously it was timely, so they wanted it quickly. And there was supposed to be a trial, like a very big trial involving a lot of these parents last September. And so the idea at that point, the book was supposed to come out in September. And I always thought of it as like a primer. Like, I'm going to give you everything I can get over the next year, so that when when the story, clicks back on again and we're all hearing about the trial, you can read this book, in 2 days and know the basic points of it,
Have some good context.
Yeah, it's a sprawling story. There's another book out that was much more, they covered all the parents, and I chose not to do that. But so, yeah, so there was sort of that intention all along, to be quick and dirty.
Yeah.
There's a constant tension in parenting between raising a child as a gesture of support for humanity and community, and then wanting to raise your kid, right? And I think the tension in the book about wanting to give your child the best of everything, and therefore having to remove from your mind the possibility that if your child gets it, another child doesn't, is a very sticky wicket. And I think we have this fantasy that it is an even trade. And we could take all of these kids who were cheated in by Rick Singer out, and it's not like their spots are going to be taken by perfect merit creatures. They're going to be taken by someone just like them, but who had slightly less criming and slightly better test scores, right? I mean, I don't know. It seems to be a difference of degree, and not.
And I don't know that it's ever going to be. I don't see it changing much. I don't know.
Really, it's deeply uncomfortable. And it is hard then. I mean, I think if one is really honest, then thinking about this, and I'm years away from having a child who's old enough to apply to college if we let them at all. But I think, not participating in that system would be an appropriate response to the way the meritocracy is recreating itself, is reconstellating itself at that level. And I say that with all the privilege of someone who benefited from that, you
Right.
know? So, but would I do that? Would I say, what would that cost my kids? I mean, they're not, we're going to hire Rick Singer. But it's, I think those are really tough questions. And Nicole, what I loved and what I found so delicious is that you didn't shy away from them, not with 9-month-olds and not with 19-year-olds.
Right.
So,
But it's crazy. It's just crazy to me to think that these parents are, at 4 years old. I mean, it's just so sad.
Oh, 9 months getting into the mommy and me circle.
Yeah. But COVID's been kind of interesting because it's called a lot of this stuff into question. I mean, do you really want to pay 50 grand for your 17-year-old to do Zoom college? I mean, so a lot of kids are deferring or not going. Some kids are opting out because, they need to help out the family or they need to work or so. It's kind of been interesting. I mean, it's been a really disruptive year for college admissions, which is a whole other discussion with the optional SAT and people, on the other hand, people applying everywhere because my God, they might get in to Yale this time. But it's interesting. It's, as the world turns upside down, it's definitely had an effect on admissions and the way people think about it.
I hope it loosens things a little bit. I hope it just unknots that, I mean, I was wondering if these same parents would pay a Rick Singer to get their kid into medical school. I mean, okay, so if we agree that Harvard, it's a fantasy that Harvard is where only the smartest kids in the country go. If we agree that that's a lie, that's not really true. Do we agree that medical school is where it really starts being meritocratic? Or what about your surgical residency? Is that where it really starts? Like, how far does that influence and privilege carry you?
I want the smartest people in those schools.
Well, right? I mean, but would the parents, I mean, at what point do they say like, okay, but let's not put them in the Pentagon? Like at what point do they bow down to some structure, some system whose excellence actually does matter to them?
Right.
And does that even exist?
I feel like there's something about undergrad, sort of where you went to undergrad, which is so, the status of that, it's an identifier in a way that I think grad school is a lesson. I don't know, I'm just speaking anecdotally and, based on nothing, but, I don't know. I mean, I think people respond to that. That's where they're going to hire. That's like, first ring of Rick Singer.
Right.
I think that's more.
I agree.
But it's all cultural. It's, I mean, status possession is cultural. It's because of the bumper stickers. It's because of the sweatshirts. I realize this crazy light on me. I'm like,
the time of day changed on you. There you go. It's probably getting your eyes a little bit.
My daughter's room.
Anyway, I mean, we could go on and on because there's just so many facets to this that is just, I mean, this the sports part of it, and students wanting that freshman experience and knowing what that, there's all of that goes along with, if they go to a junior college isn't quite good enough for a couple of years, and they miss out on, so it's just, there's so many nuances. There's so much to this. And I'm sorry, ladies, but I'm kind of glad I'm on the other end of it.
Yeah, Mazel tov. It's got to be nice over there.
But it's still disheartening. I mean, my kids are going to have kids. I have nieces and nephews who are going to go through this. It's a really hard process.
Yeah.
What would it take to empower parents so that when Rick Singer calls, they laugh? And a lot of them did, right? A lot of them got it right away and they sent him away. But what they did to their kids.
Well, those parents are as competitive as, I mean, they wouldn't be where they're at if they weren't competitive and if they didn't want that competitive advantage.
I wonder if that's true. I don't know. Maybe if they started now, but I wonder if they found themselves there by, in some cases, crazy luck. And they're trying their best to replicate that, in whatever way they can. But I couldn't imagine lying to your child like that and costing them that and running the risk of that, that's the saddest thing of all.
Yeah.
All right, ladies, this was great. This was a really great conversation. Lacy, yes, guilty admissions. It's in the chat. I will pin it up there again.
The one sitting read, maybe two.
Maybe two.
Wait,
Let's
see,
see.
I have
I've got.
This is an amazing book, and I don't have notes on a silencing because I gave it to a friend. But you are amazing, and I'm so honored and grateful that you got to be the one I got to talk to tonight. And thank you so much for all your thoughtful questions. And I mean, I think we should be interviewing you.
Yeah. I missed a question here from Anna. She says, are college admissions really going to change because of Varsity Blues?
I know, the question of all questions. I think I've answered this before. I think the athletics has changed. I think a lot of these universities have put in protocols and checks and balances so that it should be very difficult for a fake water polo player to be slipped, into the admit pile from now on. Could happen, but it will be a lot harder. But I think the bigger question of college admissions, it's just much bigger than this case. And I think the case was so much about the parents, as we've been discussing, that I haven't seen, you haven't seen colleges really make any great changes to their admissions policies. And there's a big debate about how to do it. I mean, do you, Zoom interview every applicant with an admissions officer so they really get a sense of, okay, this is a legit candidate, they really want to go here, it's not just some kid that's being funneled through. There's so many ways they can do it, but I think also just the scarcity issue, until Stanford's accepting more than 4% and these other Ivy Leagues and top schools until they're accepting bigger numbers, college is a velvet rope. And if something's a velvet rope, people want it very badly, and they will go to great lengths to get in. So then that's a whole other thing. I mean, some of these colleges could use their huge endowments to make the freshman class larger. I mean, there are lots of ways, but I think that systemic change is a much bigger question, and I don't see much of a difference 2 years later.
Yeah, it's crazy. Lacy, if people want to follow you, what's their best way to do that?
Is Twitter. Lacy Crawford on Twitter, because I'm really, really bad at Instagram and I'm not a Zuckerberg fan. So Facebook. There
you go.
Sorry.
Well, but the only reason I love Facebook is because it lets me do these kind of things, and I can't do this on any other platform.
Auto deleted because I just said that or something, but definitely. And I also have a website, and I did work for 15 years, and I did have parents who hacked in and rewrote the kids' college applications and essays. Absolutely. The way Singer used to change their passwords, we didn't mention that, but he would change the kids' passwords and fill them out himself. I mean, the guy is diabolical. It's amazing. But so anyway, I have a fair amount of experience in this, but it's a long time ago, and now I've got my own kids, and so honestly, it's like I need like a content warning before the subject comes up, because it applies. I have skin in the game, but Twitter is best.
Twitter's best. Excellent. And Nicole, how about you? How should people find you if they want to find more about
Twitter is probably best. Facebook is more like high school friends and that kind of thing. I think Twitter. I don't have a website. I'm kind of a mess as a PR person. Twitter's good.
Come talk to us.
Somebody's gonna get you, and somebody's gonna say, get that website going.
From like 10 years ago, so it's so DIY, it's ridiculous. But Twitter.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much again for joining in on this fascinating conversation. Best of luck continued with the book, Nicole. Like Lacy said, I think we see a mini series or a docu-series or something's got to come of this.
Delicious.
So
thank you for having me. And the next time I'm down in the area, I'm going to come in Warwick.
Please do. We love when authors come by, and it's a great store. So I will take us off of Facebook Live.
All right.
Good night, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Good night, Nicole.